Well, I have no idea who's here, so hello. I hope you can see my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm going to talk about accessibility for everyone today. So if I will have a couple questions for you guys as we go throughout, so stay close to that mute button. Because I just kind of want to get a feel for how much everyone understands about accessibility and how you're already meeting requirements in your work and in your job. So today I'm going to go through what accessibility is. So it might be a little bit of a review for some of you. I'm going to talk about why it's important. And then I am going to talk about the different types of accessibility and some practical ways that you can put it into your everyday. And then where you can learn more about accessibility. So we should wrap up well before the top of the hour. So first of all, who am I? You probably know me as the VP of Operations for IIBA Austin, but I'm Cindy Brummer. I am an agency owner. So I have a user experience research and product design agency called Standard Beagle. And accessibility is a big part of what we do as an agency, thinking about it, looking at it, and making sure that we are using it as part, like thinking about it as part of our research and our design process. And since we do have developers on staff, we are also implementing accessibility standards into our digital products. I teach UX through the University of Texas Boot Camps program, and accessibility is a big part of that. And then I also mentor. And I have Mom to Soup here because I gave this presentation at my son's high school earlier this year. And so honestly, if they can get excited about accessibility, I think anybody can get excited about accessibility. So first of all, let me ask you guys a question. How would you define accessibility? What is it in your opinion? I'm going to wait until you say something, so we can just going to sit here.
It's like data is accessible by all types of audiences.
Okay, so Neelam says data is accessible by all types of audiences. What does the big room say?
Anybody? Yeah, I would say something similar, like that any of your resources are accessible for anyone, regardless to if they have ability, but you make whatever attempt you can to make sure that they can access the information and absorb it in the same way that anyone else can.
Right, yeah, so equity of access too. Ooh, I don't know what just happened to my screen. Sorry, you guys. No idea what just happened. Hold on. Let me stop my share really quick.
What's that one doing?
Okay. Hold on a second. Now you can hear me? Something weird just happened with my computer. Let me just reshare. Cool. I had to undo and then redo. Cool. All right, so I should be back to sharing. Can you all see again?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, so I heard some really good answers about that. So first of all, how many people are in the big room? I can't really tell how many people are there.
8 of us. About 8.
There's 8? Okay, so half of you turn around and don't look at the screen. And then I'm gonna pick on Neelam and Laura. Stop, like close your eyes, stop looking at my screen for a second. Okay, so keep them honest. Whoever's not looking at the screen, like make sure that they don't turn around. Okay, so now everybody else read the definition of accessibility silently to yourselves. So for the rest of you, this is what it's like when other people can access information and have knowledge and you don't. This is pretty much what it's like if you are a user that is not able to access information the way that everybody else can. So go ahead and turn back around. So accessibility is the ability to access a system or an entity. So it's about making sure that people of all abilities, regardless of like disability, or it might not be a disability, but in some way they can, through whatever technologies, get that same information that everybody else has. And so by making sure that we are accessible, everybody benefits. Everybody has the same knowledge and we bring equal access to all. So very much like what the definition that Daryl and Neelam said. So hopefully everybody's turned back around. But if you can imagine, as a user who isn't able to read these things, who can't see these slides, that's pretty much what their whole experience is like. So when we talk about accessibility, we talk about the quality or the characteristic of something that makes it possible to approach, enter, or use a thing, an entity, a system. We talk about the needs of people with varying abilities or disabilities so that they can use products, services, and facilities that are built for everyone. And then also we talk about accessibility in terms of like who has access to all the information, the spaces, and the tools. So we're going to talk specifically today about accessibility to information itself, or information found online, because accessibility could be all kinds of things in your physical environment and everywhere. And right now, I just want to focus on online access. So when we talk about why accessibility is important, what comes to mind for you? If someone says, hey, we need this to be accessible, why? Why are they telling you that it needs to be accessible? Yell it out if you need to.
But the information that they're sharing is important to everyone.
Sharing is important to everyone. Yep.
Or the building, the access to that building is important to everyone. So that's why people, at least from my perspective, we would want to make something accessible. You don't want to inhibit anyone from accessing that information based on any immutable characteristics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great answer. Does anyone have anything to build off of that?
Increase participation, physically get to it, or access the present information here out of conversation.
Can someone repeat what was just said? I didn't quite hear it.
Just to increase participation by providing better access to more people.
Yeah, increased participation for sure. And I would add on to that, it's two things. One, it's it's compliance, right? There's laws. It's the law to be accessible for many entities. And also it's the right thing to do. Just morally, it's the right thing to do to make sure that everybody can access the same information. It lifts everyone up. So the statistics are that 1 in 4 like adults in the United States have some sort of disability. That's 20, it's really just about 27%. That's an extraordinary number of people. So the idea is that like you don't know who has a disability. And so instead of us, thinking that, well, most people don't, well, I guess most people don't, but still 27% is pretty significant. And we're just talking about adults, and we're just talking about the United States. We're not talking about worldwide. Now, disability falls into lots of different categories. A lot of times when we think about disability with online products, we're thinking about visual impairments. Usually we think about people who have no vision, so blind users, but there's all different kinds of vision impairments. So it doesn't just have to be someone who's blind. It could be someone like me. Maybe if I'm not wearing my contacts like I am today or my glasses, I definitely am disabled and not able. I mean, you should see me like in the morning when I'm picking up my phone and I'm just checking it, but I don't have my glasses on. So that's hard. And then I saw a woman a couple weeks ago who was reading an iPad very close to her face because of her vision impairment. We can also mean hearing impairments. People who are using video online or listening, they might have an impairment as well. We need to make sure that we are being accessible to those users. We, when we think about physical impairments, a lot of time we think about wheelchairs, but that's not the only physical impairment. A lot of times with our testing, we're looking at people who have like motion impairment in terms of like their hands. So someone who has Parkinson's disease or someone who has arthritis is going to have a hard time using that mouse. And you know, if the clickable targets on the screen are too small, they're going to have a really difficult time using your digital product or website. And then there are the ones that we really can't see at all, which are your cognitive, your learning, or any kind of other neurological impairment. So this is probably what contributes to the percentage of people being so high. And honestly, I would argue that we probably don't know the number of people who have some sort of cognitive or neurological impairment, and that percentage of users with a disability could probably increase a lot more if we captured all of those people who might not just be on the spectrum, but might have difficulty understanding the words on your website, or because there's so much going on, it might be overwhelming to them and they may not be able to absorb the information they need to. And then when we talk about disabilities, we're not just talking about permanent disabilities either. There's more than that. There's actually, in addition to permanent, there's temporary disabilities and there's situational disabilities. So let me give you some examples of what I mean by that. So when we talk about the ability to touch, a permanent disability when it comes to touch might be someone who is lacking part or all of their arm, right? Or they can't use their hands in some way at all because that's a permanent impairment for them. But there is also could be a temporary impairment. So if you have an arm injury and your arm is in a sling and you aren't able to use a keyboard and mouse like you were. I know that this happened to me about 5 years ago when I went through shoulder surgery. My whole right arm was out of commission. I couldn't drive and I had to change my mouse to be left-handed. I certainly couldn't write. So that was a temporary disability for me. And then situational is something that is maybe just in the moment and isn't going to be resolved right away, but that person has to do it. And so holding a baby in one arm or a child while you're trying to do something else, that is a situational disability. Here's another example when it comes to the ability to see. So permanent disability would be someone who's blind, can't see at all. A temporary disability might be someone who has cataracts, but they haven't been corrected yet. So they have trouble seeing. But that could be something that they resolve later. And then a situational disability in that context might be a distracted driver, someone who might be glancing at their screen very quickly to see the map, but their attention goes elsewhere. They can't fully concentrate on what's happening on the screen. So those are all examples of different types of situational and permanent and temporary disabilities. Oh, here's another one for here. So deafness being permanent. If you have an ear infection, that can cause you to lose your hearing temporarily. And then if you're in a very loud location, like if you were a bartender and you're having trouble hearing your patrons, that is a situational disability. Fun fact, someone told me once that I would make a very good bartender because I'm able to talk very loudly in loud situations. Just fun fact for you. Okay, any questions before we move on to practical guidelines for web accessibility? Okay, so when we talk about accessibility, I'll bet all of you who are working in state agencies have been told that you have to go through all these huge things in order to make your websites accessible, which can seem overwhelming and daunting. I'm going to argue that while those are important, we can do things every day that can just become part of our habits and be aware of them so that we can start being more accessible on a daily basis and personally from person to person. So it is important to understand the WCAG, otherwise known as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These guidelines cover these 4 big areas: making sure that information is perceivable, understandable, operable, and robust. So the WCAG is on 2.2 right now, and they're actually working on the guidelines for the next level of the WCAG. And they're actually going to change it, or they've proposed changing it so that it's not as confusing and it doesn't have all these different weird levels, level A, level AA, which can be quite daunting for people who are looking to implement accessibility. So the first thing that is more practical is to think about color and to think about color carefully when you're using it. One of the things that I see a lot when I'm working with business owners or with students that are putting together their work is they want to use color, which I think is awesome, but they don't think about how much contrast there is between the colors that they're using and maybe the text that's on top or the color that's behind on the screen. You have to make sure that colors have enough contrast. It's because it make things very difficult to read. I don't know about you, but when you go to a website and you have to squint because white text on, say, a light background makes it difficult, that's a very hard thing to do. You also don't want to rely on color alone for communicating information, and I'll explain in just a second. So first of all, the contrast. You can see the difference between these two, right? The one on the left is high contrast. This is white on black. But the one on the right, very low contrast. So the white on the yellow it seems like it would be, common sense that people wouldn't choose this. But I'll bet you dollars to donuts you've run across this in presentations that someone has given in your organization. You've probably seen this on websites somewhere. I know I just saw it on a website yesterday and had to give some feedback about that because they just didn't think about it and how people can't read the text on that background. So color blindness is one of the reasons why we also don't want to rely on color alone to communicate information. So color blindness in general affects men more than women. So 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women is affected by one of the forms of color blindness. It can range anywhere from the red-green to the full-on gray. I have a client who is great to test designs on because he is colorblind and he cannot see the difference between gray and red. To him, it's all gray. So when we were doing designs on his digital product, it's great to show him because he can say, I just don't see the difference. And it really forced us to make sure that we weren't using color exclusively to communicate the state of a button or to show that something has changed because he just couldn't see it. So when we have normal color vision, we might see this green ball cap differently from the t-shirt, differently from the shoes. But if we have the green red confusion and color blindness, everything looks yellow. And then we can't say that someone could be able to tell the difference between these just by communicating through color. So we have to be careful of that. We have to be additive and add something else in addition to it. So another practical thing you can start doing right away is making sure that you use that alt description on your images. So that alt is the one that we don't want to take time to actually fill out when we're putting things on Instagram or LinkedIn or just adding stuff to the website because it takes time. We want to make sure though that we are doing it everywhere. And it's far better to lean toward adding it than to try to sit there and say, it's decorative, I don't need to put anything on it. So when we have something like Instagram, it makes it available. You can add an alt, but you have to do some work to do it. So in this screen here, I'm showing you how you can do it. You have to go to new post. You have to click on the advanced settings at the bottom that they try to hide. And then you can write alt text on this screen. And what you want to do is you want to write something descriptive. You don't just want to put a label and say, this is my photo. You want to say what the person is seeing so that if I wasn't able to see the screen, you would be describing to me a pathway through flowers on like a hiking trail or something like that so that I can envision that in my head. And so once you've filled out the alt text and you save it, you can post your image on Instagram. But I'll admit these social media companies make it a little bit difficult. You kind of have to hunt for it. If you're using Microsoft, they are prompting you to do that in your documents and in your presentations. And they might even be helping you by giving you a suggested alt for that image. I encourage you to look at that, rewrite it if you need to make it descriptive because it's not always correct if it's using AI, but at least they're doing something to help be more accessible. So this is what it looks like on a website if it doesn't show up. And this happens more often than not. Some people, choose to turn off their images. They don't want to see the images because it might reduce how fast the website is. And so this alternative text that you write in is really important for them or any kind of users with visual impairments that cannot see those images. So my third set of practical tips has to do with like the readability of your content and making sure that whether it's web content or text content in a document that you're delivering or a presentation, that you are thinking about how can I make this more readable? So the first thing is that you want to make sure that the fonts are easy to read. If you're using decorative fonts and things like papyrus and lobster and all these fancy fonts, make sure that people can actually read them. You also want to use larger text sizes. I always lean toward larger, and probably because now, even with my contacts in, I still have to use readers to look at something more closely because I just can't see it. And my kids make fun of me for that, but honestly, it would help everybody. It's just more readable to use larger text sizes. You also want to make sure that you're not putting too much on the screen. It can just be overwhelming for people. And nobody is going to see your message if you clutter your screen or your document with a whole bunch of information. And you also want to make it easier for technology to read. So with the text, we want to get decorative, we want to be artistic in some cases. But when we're choosing our fonts, we want to think about how we're presenting it. So here, not only is the color of the text hard to read, but it's all smushed up and the lines are all next to each other. This is the kind of thing that people who are like really into, decorative fonts would choose. But the one on the right is so much more readable for someone. Even though the text is smaller, it's spaced out, it's in a font that's easy to read on the screen. and it makes a difference. People don't have to work as hard, because that's the thing. If someone is working really hard to read your message, they're using all of that brain power, like just to read that, and they don't have as much left over for that critical thought to have a discussion or reflect on it later. We want to make it as easy as possible. So here's another picture with to illustrate better uses of text. When you have small text, be careful that it doesn't go too small. Anything smaller than 14 point is going to be harder for people to read. I know you've seen probably legal text at the bottom of documents. I've seen it where people made it at 6 point. It's just too small. People cannot read that unless you don't intend for them to read it, which maybe some legalese is intended for that. But honestly, try not to go smaller than 14, and it's much more comfortable at 16 point or pixels or 18 point. And then larger sections of like headings should be bigger, they should be bolder. Make it scannable so people can actually see it. And despite the preference that some people have for all caps, it's very hard to read all caps, especially when you use it in larger bodies of text. I see it a lot. People choose to use it on navigation. They choose to use it as like an emphasis. It is not easy to read, and I would encourage you to stay away from all caps whenever possible. Okay, any questions so far? How many of you have actually watched someone use a screen reader? Say it out loud.
I have.
You have? Is anybody else in that room?
No.
You're in for a treat today. I've got just the thing for you. All right, hold on just a second. You're going to see my screen, my calendar. Try not to get freaked out by my calendar.
Cindy, we got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So back, a couple of slides back, you showed that for a person who can't see, right, like you closed your eyes and demonstrated that, we have to describe in that all text in the Instagram post, what it is. But if a person has not seen that, how do they perceive it? Are we communicating it clearly to them that they can perceive what they will be visualizing?
So I don't think I understand the question. Can someone repeat it for me?
Hi, this is Sukanya. So my question is, in the Instagram post, you mentioned that by adding meaningful text for the picture, so that the person visually who cannot see can visualize. I think that's the objective of that. But if a person has not seen a sunflower or something, how are they going to, like, how are the words going to be meaningful for them to imagine a sunflower?
Well, I mean,
Don't
don't
know.
forget that they aren't not in the world. So it's not like they can't be told what it is, and it's not like they can't learn it. They touch it, they smell it, they still interact with it. They have in their own head, but the meaning is a little bit different for them, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So that's why it's important to be descriptive. And so what oftentimes I've seen is where like if the people, they'll say, woman with dark skin wearing red shirt and, baseball cap, some sort of description, but the meaning might be different, but there's still meaning. And that's why we want to be as descriptive as possible. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let me make sure that I'm sharing my sound.
This is Mark Sutton from the University of California, San Francisco's IT Web Services Department. Here today with a brief tour of screen reading
Give
technology.
me a thumbs up if you can hear my sound.
I'm a blind person who has been using screen readers, braille writers, scanning equipment, other adaptive technologies since my childhood. What a screen reader does
Wait, I just want to make sure. Can y'all hear my sound?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
is, for example, I'm going to start to read this page.
Navigation line. Link. University of California, San Francisco. Link. About UCSF. Link. Search UCSF.
And what I will now do is slow down the speech rate.
Rating percent. 75%, 70%, 65, 60%, 55%, 50%, 45%, 40%. Link. UCSF Medical Center.
So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a computer screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or Braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a Braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited. Link. Image. Home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2. Search for heading level 2. You are here. Heading level 1. Make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of how that can fall apart. So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag.
You are currently on it.
To describe what that graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic.
Reader 042116.jpg.
Much less useful. So it's important to use those elements. It's also true for tables. So I'm going to move to a table.
FDA approved medications. Table 3 columns, 5 rows. FDA approved medications.
So the table is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to move into the table.
Medicine. Approved. Column 2 of 3.
And then if I go down into the table.
Medicine. Tolbutamide.
And as I move across.
Approved. 1975. Column 2 of 3.
We're getting the labels for the column headers and row headers. So it's important when programming tables, forms, and other elements on the web pages to use the proper HTML codes. I'll go to the
table 3 columns.
Second table on the page.
Medicine. Row 2 of 5 tolbutamide.
And as I'm in the table, I move across it.
Row. November 1995.
I get a date, but I don't know what that date is associated with. So it's important, as I was saying, to include proper coding tags for all these elements. These are just a few highlights of a screen reader's capabilities and some of the ways in which the experience can fall short for a blind user. The life of students, faculty.
All right, I'm going to pause that right here. I have one more to show you. This one is with a mobile device. Good.
I am not able to see what's on the screen. I'm holding it in front of my face right here like I can see it, but I can't. When I unlock the screen here and turn on my speech, I can touch the screen, and instead of activating something that I touch with my finger, it will read it to me and tell me what it is. And if I want to activate it, I touch the screen twice quickly to activate it. And that means that I need to explore the screen with my finger, or there's another command I can use called the swipe right and the swipe left. And that's it. Very similar to using the tab or shift tab keys on a desktop.
Phone number. MM text field.
MM. Okay, that's probably a month.
DA text field.
That's probably a day.
YI text field.
Yai, which it usually means multiple Ys. I'm gonna see if I can figure out how many Ys.
Misspelled words. Edit. Braille table. Deform controls. Links. Headings. Containers. Language. Default.
I'm using the rotor
Punctuation. Sum. Speaking rate. 80. Braille screen.
to go to
Words. Characters.
characters.
Cap Y. Cap Y. Cap Y. Cap Y.
Okay, 4 Ys. Because again, there's only so much you can control about how the screen reader pronounces Y, but you can certainly label these fields. I'm experiencing, as an assistive technology user, your website differently than a visual person would, but they're part of the same code base. It's the same website. When you invest in accessibility, you're going to find a lot of things with your website that you didn't even know were issues for everybody.
I like that one. I like it because it's sometimes easy to forget that we have people that are using assistive technology. And honestly, assistive technology does a great job of helping folks experience your website or your product pretty well. What where we kind of go wrong with that is, one, if we don't code it correctly or we're not putting in the proper things, and then two, if we put something in the way. So one of the prime examples of how you can get in the way of assistive technologies is by using one of those lovely accessibility overlays. They market themselves beautifully. I think one of them is called Accessibility. People have them all over the place. You know, they're supposed to be the greatest thing, but studies have actually shown that they actually make it a lot harder for people who use assistive technology. Um, they're a temporary, like, stopgap, but they should not be used permanently on any website. And if you go to the website, shouldiuseanaccessibilityoverlay.com, you will get your answer there. And if you are considering it for your website, come talk to me, and we can have a conversation about why you should absolutely not. Okay. I think number 4 is our last group of things that you can do practically in order to implement accessibility. And it's all about making sure that you're providing additional sensory information. So instead of just providing it for people who can see, also provide it for the other senses. So this might include providing additional visual cues, or it might be providing more media options for the people who are experiencing your digital product. So here's a good example with using tables and charts. A lot of times we'll see, graphs that are just like a bar with color, which can be really helpful to see, except that if you can't see the color, you might not be able to interpret that graph very well. So especially with a line chart, if all of these were gray and there was no shapes, you would have no idea which gray associates with which. What they've done here on this chart is that in addition to using color, they've also added shapes. And that's in the key at the very bottom. So the very top one is using a diamond, the middle one is using a square, and the bottom one is using a triangle. So even if a user cannot see the colors on the chart, they can still interpret it correctly and understand your meaning. So this is a great example of using more than just color. The other great thing about living in this day and age is being able to provide more captioning. Um, Enabling live captions on your meetings, or including any kind of captioning in any video that you put online is so much easier than it used to be. And you should absolutely do this every single time. I actually have a client that we work with, and I just found out that she is hearing impaired. You would never know it because we were always talking on Google Hangouts or Zoom, and she always had the captioning available to her. So if she couldn't hear me quite well, she could at least see what I was saying. And so that is a great example of being able to make things more accessible for your users. I know with me, I actually now prefer to use the captions. I like being able to see the words on the TV instead of just listening. And how many times have I seen a recent sitcom and been like, "Oh, is that what they were saying?" when I saw the captions underneath. So make sure that you're uploading captions with any video that you're posting online. Zoom makes it easier than ever to download the audio captions. They're not perfect, but hey, they're better than nothing. Or you could use a transcription tool, or even use AI tools like Otter to help you with captioning anything. So the biggest things that I want you to take away from today is at least to be aware, right? Accessibility is really important for information access for everyone. And we don't all experience the world the same way. Meaning is different. People have gotten used to their way, but just because they're doing it their way and we're doing it our way doesn't mean that we can't bridge the gap. I also want you to remember that 1 in 4 American, or at least adult in the United States, has some sort of disability. And those disabilities could be permanent, temporary, or situational. And they can fall into one of those 4 big categories: vision, hearing, movement or physical, and then the neurological, cognitive, or learning disabilities. And if you have any questions about it, the WCAG is available to you. You can go look it up and see. And there's some amazing courses out there that you can take. One of the best courses that I am actually currently taking so I can get my certification is through DQ. It looks like DEC, but with a QU. And they have some great training, but it's not the only training that's out there. Some tips I want you to take away. Right now, start your habit of adding descriptions to your images on social media, even just permanently, whether it's, job, or I'm sorry, not permanently, personally, job or personal, make that part of your everyday habit. Make sure that you're uploading captions with your videos. And then think about how you're communicating when you're putting together a report or even an email. How are you communicating it? Is this in the best way where everybody can understand it? I did find a course that you can take for free online. If you scan this QR code, it will take you right to it, and it will teach you a little bit more about accessibility and how you can pull it into your day-to-day. And with that, I'll take your questions, of which I know you have many.
What tools would you use to validate for accessibility, especially with screen? I'm not sure how.
What tools would, is the question, what tools would I use to check for accessibility?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So there's a number, like there's specialty tools, and then there's like I've used DQ's Axe tool in the browser, which is a good way to start checking to see. It's not foolproof because, it can't see it. So, but the Axe tool is really helpful. Web aim. So there's you can put your URL into it. I think it's aim, and then there's the wave tool. And you can put your URL into it, and it'll actually like look at the whole thing, and it'll give you warnings all over it. The most foolproof method is to have an accessibility checker go through your site, and they have like a whole checklist. It's human. So if you needed to go for the highest and strictest level of accessibility, that's probably the foolproof way. But if you just wanted to know, let me see if I can pull up the wave tool. Yeah, it's from WebAIM. And so you can put in your web page address. So if we did austin.iiba.org, it will pull up and it will do a little analysis, and it will show you the blatant errors, and it will show you, give you some alerts. So you can see here that there are 12 errors on the site. And some of them, there are also contrast errors, and you can go in to see what the details are. So 8 of the images are missing alternative text. There are 25 areas of very low contrast. And so I would probably get in there and those are probably the easiest to fix, at least the alternative text. And then this linked image here is also missing alternative text. So this is a great tool to use, as the free wave tool. I'm not sure that I knew that this was happening. I guess we have to fix this. Any other questions?
I think on LinkedIn, they have like alt text
think I've seen it before, but I only ever clicked on it. Do you have experience using like LinkedIn and using alt text on that?
So I heard something about LinkedIn and alt text. Can you say the question again?
Yeah, I can be a little louder. So I use LinkedIn a lot for my current business I'm in, and I have seen before, there's like an alt text, I think function to that post I could do, like was a picture involved. I haven't used it yet, so I was wondering if you used it or had experience with like alt text on LinkedIn like that. And if so, yeah, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy to use. If you're putting up a whole bunch of images, I have to say that it's pretty annoying to use and try to do
Yeah,
the alt text throughout all of them. But if you're just doing one at a time, it's fairly easy. I have noticed that you have to be in the tool to use it. If you're posting through another tool, it gets a little bit more complex. And I don't know that it's pulling over the alt necessarily, but
yeah.
within it, it's pretty easy. And I do recommend it. What I have seen, especially because I follow a lot of accessibility advocates on LinkedIn, is they're not just relying on the alt function on the image. They're also putting the description at the end of their post. So if they have an image and they say, you know, post image below shows blah, 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 blah. I've seen that quite a bit from accessibility advocates.
Okay, perfect. And then, not to sound crazy like that too, but like, I think if you hit the alt text too, it may have an AI function to where it will automatically maybe write you a description for it, or is that still manual?
Sorry, it was hard to hear. So which one is manual? Which one were you asking is manual?
The alt function on the LinkedIn,
Oh, yeah, I'm not seeing any AI in it yet. I haven't seen that. That would be interesting. I know that, I mean, especially
yeah,
since LinkedIn is adding so much AI, you would think that they would do that, but I guess
yeah,
they're more,
I'm curious because like, you know, I see when somebody posts something, like, the little gold icon pops up, like, it'll pop the random question you can ask somebody based upon their post. So I figured maybe like there could be a function with an alt that automatically just see post and be like, yeah, description of that photo, if you will.
that would be
Anyway,
helpful. We should tell
like
LinkedIn
that.
to do that, right? No, I haven't seen that yet, but I'll be looking for it because I keep checking in on certain things that I think LinkedIn should include, especially because it's become so popular and with the demise of Twitter.
Yeah.
I still refuse to call it X. It's going to be Twitter as long as I live. You know,
Yeah.
what
Do you have insight
else?
as to, do you have insight as to how the industry is being perceived and the direction it's going with regards to accessibility? Have there been any solicitation from end users and from like feedback, whether it's government or otherwise, as to where the industry is kind of going nowadays?
If I heard you correctly, you're asking about kind of the direction of accessibility, how people are responding to it. Is that right?
Or has there been studies or any kind of solicitation feedback to see, to gauge how the end users are actually perceiving and experiencing on an ongoing basis?
I haven't seen anything general in terms of feedback, mostly on a product by product basis. What I've seen in terms of you know, accessibility being added, I haven't seen anything negative. There's been no blowback on it. What I've seen is, you know, more people being aware of it, more people recognizing the need for it and being open to implementing it. So it no longer is it just for government organizations to implement accessibility. I've seen a lot more private companies asking for it and making sure that it's part of their website build or their process. Um, I have seen the users that are upset when some technology like Accessibility claims to be accessible and it's not actually helping at all. So I've seen a lot of blowback from the community of people who need the accessibility where they don't like it. I am, you know, encouraged because I'm seeing more and more presentations on accessibility. So it was a big topic at South by Southwest this year. And it continue. I don't see it as a trend anymore. I see it as something that's here, and it's just continuing to get more and more recognition of like, this is the right thing to do, and this is what we should be doing, and more people calling it out when it's not working properly.
I have another question to ask you too. So when it comes to like the, I guess the governance of like making everything accessible for people, according to the law, like I never really noticed this, but I think the gentleman mentioned in the YouTube video that to use the screen reader, there has to be like tech already built into the website, I believe, for him to access that, to be able to reach to him. And so like, is there like a standardized way that all companies should be building their websites to make everything accessible for somebody?
So if you're doing good code or HTML hygiene, all of that is already built in. So you don't need to do a whole ton that's special. So by just making sure that you're using the appropriate HTML tags on a page, the screen reader can see that. If you're making sure that you're just following like the right order of things, and you're your text is clear and legible, all of that's already built in. You don't have to put a lot of extra effort into it. The extra stuff that people usually think of is, like, oh, I have a video and I have to put up a PDF, like, readable thing for people, and I have to have another language version. That's usually where people kind of focus their attention, but you don't have to go to such crazy efforts just to make it accessible, to your users, especially if the HTML is properly done.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in my last 2 minutes? Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, y'all have a good one. I have to run to another meeting. I'll see you all later.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Likewise. Likewise. I'm gonna do the standby,
Oh, they don't, but today for some reason, they weren't aware.
So this is going back, wasn't my office.
So
I feel like you do, so.